Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own unique Black Belt leader within. I want to talk this week about why merit matters. We're seeing a lot of information in the news and in media today talking about hiring and all of these other issues where merit no longer seems to be the important measuring factor of whether or not an organization is going to be success. So I want to take us back through and look at why merit matters by going back and understanding what happens when it doesn't. I want to open with a statement. It's a slogan that many of you that lived in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s are probably familiar with. And it's a slogan that said these simple 6 words: be all that you can be. Now, if you grew up in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s, you remember that this was the recruiting slogan of the U.S. Army. This slogan, be all that you can be, first appeared in 1981. That slogan was so powerful and so effective, it ran for 2 continuous decades. Now, this mantra, this be all that you can be slogan, was a rallying cry of print, radio, and TV commercials to do one thing, and that was to invite young men and young women to consider joining the ranks of the U.S. military, the Army in particular. Now, this slogan was so powerful because it resonated across different generations, different ethnic backgrounds, and different people groups because its idealistic message spoke to one thing. It inspired visions of personal success. And that slogan was so successful, it ran for 20 years. And I just recently saw in the news that this slogan is coming back. This slogan did so well for the U.S. military, they have decided to bring this whole concept of be all that you can be back to their recruiting campaigns. Now, why was it effective? Because men and women in the U.S. Army were required to push themselves every single day. Every morning when they got up and throughout the day, during the time they served, again and again and again, they were asked to become a better version of themselves, to be all that they could be, and to be better than the version of themselves they were before. Now, the Army's tested other slogans. I think back to a few of those, like an army of one. How do you have an army of one and have an army? But that was one of the slogans they had. And then they had Army Strong. I like that one. But neither of those really connected with its intended audience. And neither of those really inspired the call to greatness that the slogan, be all that you can be, actually inspired. Now, maybe it's because of that reason, the vision and the dream and the image that it inspired, a call to greatness. Maybe this is why the Army has decided to reboot this 19 eras slogan and to utilize this in their recruiting campaigns to boost their sagging recruitment numbers by reminding young men and young women of one thing: the pursuit of excellence still matters. Now, interestingly enough, this slogan wasn't about checking a box. It wasn't about attracting people based upon their race, their color, their creed, their sex, their religion, or their national origin. It was about hiring those individuals, regardless of those superficial parameters, that wanted to become the very best version of themselves. And the U.S. Army wanted to give them an opportunity to do so, regardless of race, color, religion, creed, sex, or national origin. It was a slogan that was based on the pursuit of individual excellence. This is one of the reasons merit matters. Now, if you grew up in the South like I did, attending church was a normal part of your weekly routine. I grew up a pastor's kid, so I had no choice in the matter. From the time I was old enough to understand what was going on, I was either sleeping under a pew or sleeping on a pew, or I was involved in a church service from the time I was little bitty. But you got up early on Sundays, you got dressed up, and you first went to Sunday school, and then you went to the morning church service. You went home, you played around for the afternoon, but then you went back on Sunday night for the evening service. And in those services, in Sunday school and in church service on Sunday morning and church service on Sunday night, you received moral instruction with an emphasis on becoming the best version of yourself. Again, being all that you could be. Now, interestingly enough, the Sunday school movement, that was the first thing you went to on Sunday mornings. That Sunday school movement began in Britain in the 1780s. The Industrial Revolution was taking place, and during this period of time in history, men, women, and children all worked in the factories. And because the Industrial Revolution was booming at the time, children, many children, were being forced into factories to work, depriving them of an opportunity to earn an education, especially if they were from families of nominal means. Now, when they couldn't get an education, it limited their opportunities in life. And with children working 6 days a week, Sunday was the only day available to them for education. And so some of the churches and some of the pastors decided that they would offer free educational classes to teach these children to read, to write, to learn history and science, and to give them an education that would allow them to further themselves to be all that they could be. Now, by the mid-19th century, Sunday school attendance had spread to America. And after it spread to America, this Sunday school attendance to give children an opportunity to learn, to grow, to become a better version of themselves, this became an integral part of preparing children academically for success in life. Even parents who did not attend church, were not faith-based people, wanted their children enrolled in Sunday school for the academic excellence it provided. Now, not only did it provide it, it demanded it. The kids that went to these Sunday schools learned, and they learned at a very high level. And the education they received compared to the education children receive today is miles and miles apart. The other thing I liked about this traditional Sunday school model is not only did it demand academic excellence, it also taught moral principles. It also taught important character values that it helped to develop in children, teaching them important life lessons. Now, parents saw an opportunity for their kids to get the education maybe they never got, and to have an opportunity for their children to rise to their full potential and experience a life and more success than maybe their parents had experienced. Now, the Bible was a textbook that people used for learning to read, and if you could learn to read King James English and be able to understand what you were reading, you were getting a pretty good education. Copying passages from the Bible was one of the exercises in learning how to write. So as they were reading and writing, they were getting moral instruction. They were learning character values. They were learning history lessons as well, because the 6,000 years of recorded human history that are recorded in the 66 books of the Bible provide lessons on leadership, cooperation, teamwork, compassion, courtesy, respect, discipline, and many more leadership skills. Now, not only was the quality and quantity of the learning that was amassed by children in these Sunday schools incredible in terms of the education it gave them, it fostered a generation of scholars. Hear what I said, not just kids that could barely read and write, but scholars who by today's standards would be considered gifted and talented students. Now, this early educational system also fostered academic excellence, and it focused on helping kids be the best that they could be. It modeled the slogan that the Army adopted more than 200 years later. Now, this Sunday school system was singularly focused on helping the students of working class families become all they could become, to develop their academic excellence, to instill them with morals and values and character so that those children could become all that they could be. Now, interestingly, if you go back and you look at this Sunday school movement in history, even after the United Kingdom and the United States both adopted compulsory state education in the 1870s, many parents, again, even those who didn't attend church, still insisted that their children attend Sunday school on Sundays to continue to receive moral, character, and religious instruction because it helped to mold and make their children into better, more well-behaved, and more successful children. Now, why did this happen? Because the focus was on helping children become the best that they could be, to teach them the value of hard work, to teach them the appreciation of a job well done, and to teach a willingness to do more than was expected or required. And they tied rewards to accomplishing these things. Dedication, commitment, competency, and excellence were what was rewarded. You just didn't get a medal for showing up. This was a time in our history when merit mattered. Now, then we ushered into the 1960s, and there began a movement away from morals-based instruction. People began to move away from teaching important character values to their children and instilling the importance of good self-leadership, national pride, love of country, and love of our fellow man. And as a result of this shift away from teaching those things, something in our culture began to change. Rather than holding students accountable to the high standards we saw in the Sunday school movement era and incentivizing them to strive for excellence, school systems started to grade on the curve. Now students have to have to study as hard or learn as much or prepare as fully for an exam, knowing they could likely get a bump in their grade provided they were average or slightly better. So dedication, commitment, competency, and excellence were no longer being rewarded because we had lowered the standards. This is why merit matters. Now, fast forward a few years from the 1960s, and what do we see? No child left behind. That became to be the new mantra in society and in our educational system today. And as a result of that, we now see students being promoted, many of them without even a basic competency of the subject matter at their current grade level. According to a September 26, 2023 article in Scientific America, biennial testing by the NAEP consistently shows that 2/3 of American children today can't read proficiently, and 40% of American children are essentially non-readers. Did you hear what I just said? 2/3 of American children today can't read proficiently, and almost half of them are essentially non-readers. How in the world do we expect our children to be able to rise to their full potential when they can't even read? Now, another study by the United States Department of Education found that 1 in 5 high school graduates in 2015 could not read. Did you hear what I said? 1 in 5 high school graduates in 2015 could not read. The numbers today, by all the indications we're seeing, are worse than that. The National Institute of Literacy reports that there are 32 million Americans alive today in the United States who cannot read above a 5th grade level. Now, this is what happens when dedication, commitment, competency, and excellence are no longer rewarded. And this is why merit matters. Now, this is what happens when we start to make excuses as to why Johnny or Mary can't read or can't write. This is what happens when we keep children trapped in a failed educational system that is no longer focusing on academic excellence and preparing students for success in life. Rather than working harder to improve the outcomes for underprivileged students and those who are struggling academically, what do we see schools across the United States doing? Lowering standards or removing the standards altogether. And in this United States that we live in today, we see many schools no longer recognizing valedictorians. They're eliminating honor society and other program that recognizes academic excellence from the actual curriculum of the schools. They're replacing the ABCDF grading system with a pass or fail standard, or they're removing grading altogether. We're seeing many schools across America no longer giving homework assignments to kids and asking them to go above and beyond to learn other than just the very basics to simply get by. Now, as I've read this and as I've done some research into this, I'm reminded time and time again of a statement I've heard Tony Robbins say over and over again for many years. Tony says this: what gets rewarded gets repeated. Now, think about that. What gets rewarded gets repeated. So when we reward average and mediocre, that's what we get more of. When we reward laziness and excuse making, what do we get? We get more lazy people and we get a generation of excuse makers. When we reward teachers with tenure so they can't be held accountable for the outcomes of their students and they can't be fired, we end up with a generation of students who can't read, can't write, lack the leadership skills to effectively lead themselves and lead others, and they haven't learned the lessons of history because we've been erasing or rewriting history to accommodate some crazy ideology that's wanting to take over this great nation. Now, sadly, parents have bought into this. The millennials were raised in a culture by their Gen X parents that refused to believe in winners and losers. This is where the participation medal and the participation trophy showed up. Everybody got a medal or everybody got a ribbon or everybody got a trophy just for showing up. When you played sports, you didn't keep score anymore because you couldn't have winners and losers. You no longer recognized the star athletes. You no longer recognized and honored and rewarded those who showed up, showed out, and proved that they were the very best. Success in that era became relegated to simply signing up, showing up, and putting forth little or no effort. And if all you did was sign up and put on the shirt and sit on the bench and you never practiced, you never did anything to improve yourself, you still got a medal as if you're a winner. Dedication, commitment, competency, and excellence were no longer rewarded. Now, again, this is why merit matters. Now, fast forward to today. Today, we live in a culture of victimization. Everybody is a victim, and often for some of the craziest, wildest, most whimsical excuses that you can imagine. And even worse, society today and corporate America is catering to victimhood. Everybody has to have their safe spaces today so that so-called microaggressions that abound are stressing them out. We have a generation of children and young adults who don't know how to live real life. And sadly, if you disagree with what they believe, you dare to question their credentials, their accomplishments, their philosophy, their ideology, or point out their mistakes, their flaws, or their shortcomings, guess what? You're racist. Today, we focus on equity rather than equality, and there's a huge difference between the two. Equality says everyone has the same opportunity to learn, to grow, to improve, and to rise to their full potential. But equality, hear me, equality puts the responsibility of the outcome on the individual. It puts it on the person to have an opportunity to become the best person they can become. Equality puts the responsibility on you to become the very best version of you that you can. That means you've got to do the hard work. You've got to put in the hours. You've got to put in the reps. You've got to become the subject matter expert, and you've got to earn your black belt in your chosen art, profession, or trade. Equity, on the other hand, simply says we're going to take from those who have, we're going to give to those who have not, and we're going to lower the standards to where excellence isn't demanded and average, mediocre, lackluster, and okay is all you've got to aim for. And as a result of that, everybody now becomes equal because we've lowered the standards, and those who have been successful, we've taken that success away. Those who have made money, we're taking that money away from them. Those who have had an opportunity to excel, those rewards of success are being taken from them and giving to individuals who haven't earned what success brings. Now, when you begin to talk about equity, you're removing the responsibility from the individual allowing them to remain a victim, and you put responsibility in the hands of an institution like the government. You no longer have to do the hard work. You no longer have to put in the effort. You no longer have to become a subject matter expert. You no longer have to strive to be the best that you can be. You simply get the medal just for showing up. How is that success? How is that giving you an opportunity to truly be all that you can be when you're striving to be nothing but average, mediocre, lackluster at best? As you look back through the annals of history, we see examples of socialist and Marxist regimes where this type of effort of bringing equity has been tried and it's failed. Again and again and again, that lesson of history has failed. But when you fail to teach history and you fail to learn the lessons from history, you're destined to repeat those same mistakes over and over again. But when it comes to equity, understand this. When everyone is equal, everyone is lacking because no one has enough. Your country goes from being the greatest country in the world to maybe good, but likely it goes from first world status to third world status. And everybody looks around and wonders what happens to the amazing country they once lived in. Now, even businesses today have started catering to this social aberration, and they are now hiring based upon diversity, equity, and inclusion quotas. Now, hear me when I say this. There is nothing wrong, and there are a lot of things right with having a diverse workforce. But when you hire people predominantly based on their skin color, their race, or their sex, or their national origin, without regard to the underlying qualifications they have, you're not going to be hiring the best people. And when you don't hire the best people, you don't get the best outcomes. You end up settling for less. And when you settle for less, this is not a recipe for success. You know, I think back to Martin Luther King Jr. and his amazing dream that he shared on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial when he talked about a colorblind America where people would not be judged by the color of their skin or any other external quality, but they would be judged by the content of their character. They would be judged by who they are on the inside. Sadly, that dream of a colorblind America has been replaced by an emphasis on what divides us rather than what unites us. Oh, that we had a Martin Luther King Jr. speaking of a colorblind America today. Today in corporate America, today in our institutions that we see, our colleges across the country, we hire to check a box rather to hire the best. We see it in our government. We see it in businesses. We see it across the country because we have chosen to hire based upon what divides us to meet some arbitrary quota rather than hiring the very best people and helping those that aren't yet the best get the tools and resources and opportunities they need to learn what they are missing to become the best versions of themselves, but putting the responsibility back on them to have to do the work, to do the reps, to become the subject matter expert, to have an opportunity to be all that they can be. But sadly, when you hire to check a box rather than hire the best, dedication, commitment, competency, and excellence are no longer rewarded. Now, this is why merit matters. And it bodes a question that I ask quite often: why not let everybody compete and let the most qualified person win, regardless of age, color, religion, sex, or national origin? Why not let everyone compete and let the most qualified person wins? Because when the most qualified person wins and you get competent people that are striving for excellence, all working together as a team, that organization, to borrow a phrase from Jim Collins, goes from good to great. Understand in life, there are always going to be winners and there are always going to be losers. If you don't like it, get over it. This is life. Now, not everyone is great at everything. Let's admit it. There's 30% of things that we can't do at all. There's roughly 50% of things that we're okay at doing, but not great at doing. But there's 20% of the things that we can do, we do better than everything else. Why not focus on being the very best at the 20% of the things that we are best at doing and developing our talents in those areas to become the very best version of ourselves in that area? So here's a challenge. Find out what you're good at and work hard to become the very best at whatever that is. Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. This is life. This is why merit matters. Let me leave you with this. For America to continue to be the greatest nation on the earth, we need a populace of people living inside our borders who are committed to becoming the greatest version of themselves. We need people in this United States who are dedicated, who are committed, who are competent, who are hardworking, who are diligent, and who are committed to excellence. We need people who value themselves and value others. And we need people who want the best for themselves and the best for others and will work together so that everyone has an opportunity to be the best and achieve the best and experience the best as they strive for excellence in everything that they do. That's what black belt leaders in life do. They live life with black belt excellence, and they work hard to help others achieve their goals and objectives. You know, I think back to Zig Ziglar, and Zig said you can have as much success in the world as you want as long as you help other people get all the success in life that they want. I think that's a great mantra. You can have anything you want as long as you help enough other people get that in their lives. But you can't have a great nation when you only have average, mediocre, lackluster people who are willing to accept okay and good enough as good enough. For America to be great, we need great people. That is why merit matters. Hey, I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Black Belt Leadership. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.